Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock, let's go over the market, let's talk about what is happening to Tesla, what is happening to the market, and what we can expect moving forward. Tomorrow is obviously a big day for Tesla, or at least it should be a big day for Tesla. We have the investors shareholder event, if you will, where we also are supposed to find out whether or not Elon's comp plan is going to be approved or not, right? So let's see how that goes. It's technically up in the air. There's a lot of, back and forth. Nobody really knows. So it's a big day. Let's see how this pans out and let's see how the stock reacts. But as of now, I'll give you my thoughts. So if you enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice and I'm not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, updates, etc. Well, again, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day as the market is open. So definitely check that out. That link is, of course, down below in the description of the video, where again, you can click this first link right here. I may have to sneeze. Excuse me. For just $3 a month, you get access to my Tesla tier, all my Tesla updates, broader market updates, things on, like SPY, VIX, etc. Different time frame analysis, options, flow, all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. Tier 2 is, of course, NVDA as well, if you're interested in NVDA updates for just $5 a month. And for $7 a month, Tier 3, you get access to the whole package, right? Which also includes my Tier 3 posts, essentially about stocks and charts that are pretty much not Tesla and not NVIDIA. And also access to my private Discord where we have a Tier 3 chat room. And also I do chart requests every single Sunday with members. So Tesla up a very nice 4% on the day, closing at $462 and some change. So what does this mean moving forward? So like I said, tomorrow's a big day, right? The main thing I'll be looking at moving forward, going into tomorrow, is going to be, well, again, for the most part, we're still sandwiched in between these two levels, right? We ended up closing right at this kind of thing. Kind of what I mentioned was similar to these two candles over here, right? We had that gap up and we had that gap up this morning. We actually sold off a decent amount. We didn't lose an important level. I'll go over that on the 1 hour later. But we ended up actually holding pretty well around the kind of, we'll say mid to about the low 440s. Now, obviously on the flip side, we also have resistance here, well, at the mid to low 460s, which so far, we're holding fairly well up here. But, showing a little bit of resistance though, right? Showing some selling pressure that's still obviously very much there. So simply put, what does Tesla actually need to do? What does the stock need to accomplish here for it to, at the very least, to come back up to the 480s and, more or less retest previous all-time highs, or I guess really current all-time highs, I should say. It needs to turn this 460s, mid to low 460s into support, right? Any gap up tomorrow morning actually could be a potentially good sign, right? Gap up, come down, turn into support, and then head higher. Again, this all hinges on the comp plan, the investors day. So, think of it as a mini earnings, technically speaking. So, we'll see how this actually goes. We'll see how this plays out for the most part, but something worth watching, right? And seeing how that actually pans out and how the stock will react. So it's gonna be hard to predict. Could be some volatility based on how it goes, for better or for worse. But structurally and just strictly looking at the levels overall, yeah, we want to go ahead and break above and then ultimately turn this sort of mid to low 460s into support, right? Again, something like this. That's what we want to do. But until that happens, and for now, as we're currently seeing it, as long as this sort of low to mid 460s area continues being a overall resistance, well, we need to go ahead and keep treating it as a resistance and essentially as bearish territory, if that makes sense. So that's something to worth monitoring. Now this morning we ended up holding that 21 EMA pretty damn well. We didn't end up closing down below it. So another key way to look at Tesla in terms of just overall momentum is, do we ever close a daily candle? Not just go below the 21 EMA, but close daily candles below the 21 EMA. Do we ever close daily candles below? We only had one daily candle here where the market was getting a bit of an oopsie doopsie for the most part. But, we had that kind of closure down below there, right? That was the one anomaly, I guess. But you can see pretty much every single other candle in this whole time right here, except for this one here, it's despite going below it, even on this candle here, it still continues to close above it, including yesterday. We were pretty much right at it, but today we went below it, but again, we're closing above it. So if we ever start seeing daily candle closures below the 21 EMA, yeah, that could be a bit of a concern, right? That could be some potential sign of, at the very least, short-term momentum loss, and we could get a nice move to the downside further and revisit maybe the mid 420s to about 430 itself, right? That's going to be that kind of level I'll be looking at if, of course, that actually occurs. But for now, I expect, continued sandwich price action in between these two zones right above us and not too far below us until one of them snaps and essentially turns into the opposite thing. So this resistance into support or this support into resistance, right? For the most part. That's probably the simplest way of putting it. The MACD is still unfortunately red, so the MACD isn't fully, buying this move just yet. Going over to the 4-hour time frame, right? We have the SMI starting to cool off, but it's near the middle of the zone, which is good. And it's definitely a lot better than when it was up here, absolutely. But it's definitely not at the bottom. You know, usually when it's at the bottom, that's where I start getting a little more interested, right? That's where things are a lot more enticing, we'll say. We're definitely not there right now, right? But, you know, if we end up coming back down, and let's say we do get a rejection, and I'll go over a potential bear case scenario on the 1-hour time frame very soon, because I like to look at both sides as usual, you know, that could potentially validate this 4-hour SMI to actually come back to the bottom of the range, or at the very least damn close to it, kind of like those instances before. Or if I zoom out, all these previous instances where the stock did find pretty significant bottoms, and that would present, you know, a potentially pretty good risk type reward scenario, and, you know, a strong support, I guess you can say, for the stock. So it really depends on how this plays out and how the stock reacts to tomorrow's investors day, essentially. So let's continue monitoring that and seeing how that goes. But worth mentioning that it is right in the middle. So, you know, it's not great, but it's not bad either, right? It's not completely overbought and concerning, but it's not kind of oversold, if you will, and looking enticing either. You know what I mean? So let's continue monitoring to see how that goes. Now, the bear case, I like to always look at things in both perspectives, right? What are the bulls looking at? And again, I do lean bullish still, because the daily is still looking pretty good. We're still holding the EMAs, you know, we're still showing some decent strength, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I do continue leaning bullish, absolutely. But even then, I still like to look at the bear case. What are the bears looking at? What are the bears salivating over potentially? Or what are they eyeballing for a potential opportunity even, right? That's what we want to also pay our mind to as well here. And what I'm seeing right now that the bears are trying to, you know, potentially salivate over, if you will, is, yeah, there is this potential of this head and shoulders pattern. Now, I've been seeing a lot of head and shoulders pattern in the markets, like the bearish one, which is the one we're potentially setting up here. Not really do a whole lot, to be honest. A lot of them have been falling apart. So this could absolutely fall apart. There's no guarantee whatsoever that this pattern plays out. But while it's still developing, you can see the head here, left shoulder here, and now we're developing the right shoulder here, right? So what the bears want to do is they pretty much want to take this sort of mid 460s region, 465, 466, you know, ish, right? Give or take a couple of dollars, of course, kind of like what it did here. Actually, I could put a line right here. Check this out. Kind of like here, right here. You can see nice little rejection, right? And then this was the head. That was a support. Now it's a resistance again, kind of like what it was here. So essentially the bears want to defend pretty much, honestly, about 2 days high, 465, 466, around there, right? If they can do that, yeah, this becomes a potential threat, I guess you can say. And I use the word threat specifically because, again, you have to remember, patterns themselves are meaningless until activated and or really triggered, right? So what triggers this potential head and shoulders pattern? Because even if we do get a small rejection from here, come back down, let's say back to 450, for instance, and then rocket past that, well, that's all still pretty good news, obviously, right? So the only thing that triggers this head and shoulders pattern is not only obviously a, you know, continued rejection from this range and the bears holding their territory, if you will, but ultimately breaking down below about 439 to 440, pretty much this low here and pretty much 2 days low. If we start breaking and cracking below this range, that would be that sort of neckline of this head and shoulders pattern, and that's where we can potentially get that revisit back to. Honestly, really wouldn't be surprised to see about the mid 420s again, if, of course, this pattern snaps to the downside. Worth watching, right? Worth watching. Let's see how this actually plays out. You know, is this something that's going to happen or not? You know, it's anyone's guess. Nobody knows for sure, but that's something worth eyeballing and continuing to watch moving forward. That's pretty much the majority of what I want to see. Or majority of what I see rather on Tesla stock right now, going into, again, what could be a potentially big day tomorrow and Friday, because Friday will be, I'm not sure what time the investors, it's usually sometime in the evening. So I assume Friday will be that open market reaction. We'll still get some reaction after hours, of course, but open market reaction Friday. Next 2 days could be pretty impactful and potentially volatile for Tesla. Let's see, guys. Let's see. So SPY, let's take a look at SPY. So far, going to the daily time frame, yeah, holding that 21 EMA, right, came right down into it. And like I said, you know, holding the 21 EMA and previous all-time highs, now resistance will now support at around that 674 region. Yeah, holding it, you know, not too shabby, right? Pretty damn good over here. SPY also potentially still making this sort of bull flaggy type pattern over here as well. So the best case scenario for SPY, at least in my opinion, two things. Number one, continue holding essentially 2 days low, right? And then if we take a trend line, go from here and draw it down something along the lines of this, give or take, of course, right? Something like that. Let me go ahead and fix this little thing here. Beautiful. Right? Look at it. Something like that. Yeah, breaking, in my opinion, above the low 680s, again, would be pretty damn good, right? That's what the bulls want to see. They want to see a break above that low 680s. If they can break above the low 680s, that could be a positive development, especially getting back above this trend line, this one right here that we're so far the last 2 days treating as a resistance. So we have support down here, resistance up here, kind of like what we were doing here for the most parts, right? Treating that trend line as a resistance this entire time. Then we finally gapped above it and, you know, we're good to go. Kind of the same idea over here. Now, do we get another gap above and go? We could, absolutely. But again, essentially, if the bulls can continue holding this sort of 21 EMA 674-ish region and also get back above the low 680s, that would be fantastic news. This bull flag essentially would play out and we go ultimately higher, right? We ultimately just continue higher in the overall broader market. But if we start losing 674, then I do think a quick visit to about 667 or so, resistance here, support here, resistance here, support here, would be that next visit. Also very close to that 50 EMA, which is where we bounced more significantly on that recent drop that we had as well. So that's kind of my levels to the downside. 674 below that, yeah, I do think about, we'll just say the mid 660s, honestly, is probably that next target and where we will visit next overall. But all in all, guys, that's all I got for you. VIX is holding potentially strong here a little bit, right? It's above the orange line, trying to turn into support. So the VIX has risk of another pop. Let's see how that goes going into the remainder of the week, maybe into next week as well. Again, just because it's above, it doesn't mean it'll pop right away. It can just dance above here for a bit, kind of like what it did here for the most part. You know, just dancing, not really doing anything just yet. Maybe it pops next week, right? We don't know exactly when. Maybe it won't pop at all. Maybe it just comes back under. Like, we don't know. But the point is the fact that holding above this orange line, which it so far is, does have that risk of the pop. Doesn't mean it will, doesn't mean it'll be a substantial pop, but a pop, some potential volatility. Worth monitoring and watching. So all in all, guys, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.